Learn to improve conversions and generate more leads with the video podcast at marketingoptimization.tv.
Hi, and welcome to the Marketing Optimization Podcast with Alex Design. I'm your host, Alex Harris, and today we're chatting with Chris Hexton from Vero. How you doing, Chris?
Hey, good. Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, Chris is the co-founder of Vero, an email service provider, I would guess you would call yourself, and they do some really interesting things with email, and I think you're really going to enjoy this episode. To get started, what would be your definition of optimization, and why is it beneficial?
Yeah, great question. So I think my definition of optimization, I would say it's the process of refinement. So looking at the steps, from A to B, it might be from the time customer first hears about you until the time they buy for a second time, and breaking that down into really delineated steps and then refining each one of them. And obviously that's a process of trial and error, but I would say that's a pretty good definition of how I think about it.
Yeah, never-ending improvement. It's what it's about. And today we're going to be chatting about specifically email. You run the company Vero, and I've actually had the chance to use your software a little bit. But just to lay the groundwork, can you just give us a little bit of overview of what you guys do?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you said at the start, I think ESP is a good way to describe us. We're an email platform, and our differentiator, our focus as a company is on behavior. So helping people track exactly what their customers are doing and how they're interacting with their business, and making it easy for you to store and see patterns in that data or see groups of users in that data, and then automate and send really targeted emails to those groups of people. So, trying to increase the personalization of each email you send so that your customers have a really great experience with your business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we're going to go through some of the process of using that to your advantage of whatever type of website you have, whether it's an e-commerce site or a SaaS product. Depending on how your customers flow through your site, you can target them with different kinds of emails. We're going to go into details of that, but you just gave a great presentation related to the top 10 email hacks that you've shared. Can you just briefly share a couple of those hacks before we get into the behavioral targeting?
Yeah, so that was at Elite Camp over there in Europe, and I broke the talk down into four topics and then four real world examples, I guess, of putting those things into practice. So I sort of cheated with the 10. But the four things I talked about, the first one was, there's a big trend, and obviously Vero is a big fan of this trend in making sure you've got a really complete picture of each individual customer. So at least when it comes to email marketing, traditionally, if you're using a list-based system, it's very easy to get to a situation where your customers are on various lists and information is siloed, and then you're worried about customer getting the wrong email at the wrong time, and you're worried about sending someone 5 emails on the same day, and you're worried that you're missing data. So you get things like hey first name, where the first name's missing, and so there's definitely a trend of people making sure they've got a complete view of each individual customer, and it's important to have a data store somewhere, whether it's a tool like Vero or your own database, or another tool where you can have that complete picture. So that would be number one. Second thing I spoke about was automation or triggers, not just as a way to do less work per se, because I don't believe that that's the case, but as a way to deliver more context. So if a user's done something and then they receive something related to that action, it obviously makes a lot more sense to the recipient. So that's the second thing I spoke about, triggers as a way to provide context. I spoke about segmentation. So no one loves having, I don't think anyone loves having hundreds and hundreds of emails in their inbox, and segmentation is a great tool to perhaps send less email but make sure each email counts. And the fourth thing I spoke about was different ways to graph your data or view your data to try and find hidden insights as to where you can optimize either individual emails or series or whatever it might be.
Yeah, I loved it, and I actually read the breakdown on the Conversion Excel website, and I'll link to that. Just to rephrase some of the things he said. Don't send more email. Send more considered email to the right people. Send triggered email based on behaviors. Tailor the email content based on what they did actually on your website. And then the segmentation, don't send the same email to everybody on your list. They do different things. They have different wants. So send personalized data in your email. And then the getting the right people onto your list in general, having qualifying questions related to the sign up fields. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so you're more quotable than me with my own quotes. That's a really good summary. I think the key thing of all those things that you just said and I just said before is really treating people as an individual. And so part of that is being able to know who they are. And so your last point there, constantly being able to collect data from the customers is important. So that could involve having, one thing I spoke about in the talk was actually something we did. We're a SaaS company. We obviously use email a lot to market our own company and to help customers have a better time. And one thing we did last year was started asking people when they sign up how many subscribers they've got to get a sense of what their needs are, how big their business is. And that key piece of information alone, which allowed us to develop a couple of different segments of customers, made a big difference to how we could treat people. If someone's a lot bigger, what they're going to be looking for is different to someone who's smaller, who's maybe just getting started with triggered email. So we could tailor the content and tailor our customer success conversations with them, etc. So I spoke in the Elite Camp talk about that there's at least one thing you could segment on. So if you're a clothing retailer and you sold men's and women's clothes, obviously a really basic place to start with segmentation would be to ask your users, are they male or female, or to try and track that in some other way implicitly. So I think thinking about starting simple and then getting more granular with the data you're collecting is a great way to deliver better email.
About that when I approach that to a client, they're like, I really don't know how to make that work. And I think that's what the beauty of your software is that it basically, you explain it, but it's the way I understood it is that as soon as you tag certain elements of certain pages, you can figure out if they go to a certain video or a certain page on your website. And so on e-commerce, majority of personalization all comes down to cart abandonment. They leave the cart, you want to send an email. But Vero is way much more than that. So could explain how it kind of all gets set up.
Yeah, I mean, so the concept is you want to track as much data as you can in real time, I suppose. And the implementation is that we have an API, and most common for our customers is to use our JavaScript library. And that's similar to Google Analytics Events API, which I'd imagine a lot of people will be familiar with. So when you install it, it then listens for what you tell it. And once you get someone's permission to email them, if they fill out a sign-up form or subscribe and subscribe to give you permission, or if they sign up and give you permission, you can say to Vero, hey, this is Chris, he's on my site, here's his email, and we will then manage the setup of dropping a cookie so that when that user returns, we know who they are. And then from there, you can get into the really fun stuff of tracking what they're doing, which could be as basic as page views, or you can get more complex and track very specific activities. So you could put snippets of JavaScript to track when people click a button. But most people do things like, in an e-commerce context, tracking when someone views a product, every time they view a product, and then what the product is and what category it's in. If someone does a search, you could track that they searched for a product and that the search terms were jumpers, sweaters, whatever it might be. And then, all the way through to tracking when someone begins a checkout, when they complete a checkout, when they return, if they refer to a friend. So the idea is to really track in real time the key lifecycle events for your business, from the moment someone hears about you to the moment they become a customer. And Vero collects all that, and then you can log in and, as you said, play with that data.
Yeah. So as you've collected all this data, any best practices for using it to increase your conversions? Any specific examples or ideas to use that to leverage your sales or leads?
Yeah, the first thing I say is, and you sort of alluded to this before, is when people approach email for the first time, I guess it can be daunting or overwhelming in that, where do you get started? And I think, so my first piece of advice in terms of using it would be, don't get in over your head. Start simple, or start by looking at your funnel, right? As I just said, from the place where someone first hears about you to the place where they become a customer, and then I always say, look at the place where you got the biggest drop off. So if the biggest drop off's here, how can you use email to move people from A to B? And then maybe the next biggest drop off's from step D to E, or whatever it may be. So start simple by focusing on, well, where can you get the most gains? And that'll make you happy, because when you actually improve those conversion rates with email, you'll be you'll be able to take those learnings and refine them and then use them in the other steps. So I think that's the first thing is, you're going to be collecting all this data in real time. Where on earth do you begin? Map out your sort of 5-6 key journey points, and then focus on the places where they've got the lowest conversion from one point to the next, if that makes sense. So that's the first thing I'd say. And then other than that, I think the other big win, broad win, would be, making the emails personal. And one of the key things in Vero is trigger-based messaging, which adds a lot of context or personalization out of the box, just because it's like user did X, send them Y 3 days later if they haven't done A, B, and C. But then you can also dynamically insert. So let's say you were sending someone an email when they view a product and they haven't bought that product 2 days later. You could actually insert a picture of that product and all that good stuff, which makes it really, really specific for that individual. And if you look at companies like Amazon and Airbnb, they do a really great job at this sort of stuff.
Yeah, it's really interesting, especially in e-commerce, because we try to find that 80-20. Majority of e-commerce sites make 80% of their revenue off of 20% of their inventory. So we try to get people to buy that 20% majority of the time, especially first-time visitors. But then we want them to come back and buy more products. So we use it to figure out the average time that they may need to come back or may they need to buy. For example, in the case of selling protein shakes, they come on, they buy a protein shake, but maybe not ready yet for a new container of whey protein. But maybe you want to send them some recipes just to keep top of mind of other things going on. And you can kind of automate that. Once you have their email and their permission, you just, here's some free protein shakes. Come back to our website.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's an interesting example. I mean, sending recipes would be good because then they'd be using more protein, which would speed up the purchase cycle anyway. So that's a cool example. But yeah, absolutely. And trying to, by knowing what they purchased, you could then send those very relevant automated follow-up emails. So spot on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we also do some interesting things because we want them to get back to the site because, they take other supplements and things like that and buy stuff. But we actually want them also to get repixeled with some of our retargeting ads. Yeah, so when they go back to Facebook or to pay-per-click, to AdWords or even to YouTube, we serve them new content, our freshest content, whatever it is. It's like the new way to get people in this ecosystem. Email brings it all back together.
Yeah, that's a really good point as well. And treating it like an ecosystem is the right attitude. And then, as you're saying, leverage each of these things to help each other out. So I mean, that's awesome as well. That's pretty. Not common stuff, so pretty sophisticated. I like it.
Yeah, the book comes out, so it just keeps people top of mind. And you can do the same thing with your SaaS company, your information products. Just a way to personalize email to keep you top of mind and get you coming back for all the great things that you have. Because one lesson I learned, I worked at a .com for 11 years and we collected a lot of email. And people are going to opt out. That's the bottom line. People are going to opt out, but they're going to opt back in. I don't know how many times you have unsubscribed and resubscribed to HubSpot, but me, it's probably like in 50, 60 amount of times, because you always have to unsubscribe and resubscribe, whatever it's right for you, and it's just pretty common. You want to keep your list pretty fresh. So maybe talk a little bit about open rates, click rates. You probably have a lot of experience in improving some of those things.
Yeah, I think, the first thing I'd say is it's different depending on every industry, right? So there's no hard and fast rule, but the trick is to really look at your numbers. And in the fourth part of that talk where I was talking about visualization, I think that's probably the most relevant. I'm just trying to think of a good way to frame it. But one thing I've been really fascinated with lately is, when you're sending a whole bunch of emails, and particularly if you're embracing this automated stuff, you're going to have emails flying left, right, and center. They're going to be very targeted. How do you find where should I optimize? So this is hard to illustrate without a diagram, but and it's somewhere on our blog as well. But we did this thing recently for one of our own series of automated emails where we graphed over time. From the time the user took the action, we sent an email 1 day later, 2 days later, 4 days later, whatever it was, and graphed the click rate and then a sort of average line across that time range. And it was something we'd never done before, but really interesting to see the results, because you got that average line. You can see the campaigns in that email series, which was maybe 15 emails long, that were really true outliers. So the ones that had amazing click rates, and you can then say, okay, well, why? Is it the email body? Is it because it's triggered really close to the event? And then the ones that had really crappy click rates. And so then we could dive in there and run tests on those. So I think in terms of what I've been thinking about of late to optimize those is we'll find the weakest spots to do the test first. And so there's a lot of visualization tricks you can use to help you find the weak spots. Rather than banging your head against the wall trying to move a click rate from like 21% to 22%, if you can find one that's 10% and lift it to 20%, that's really where the insight is. So like, where can you make the biggest impact?
Advice for when to send the right when to send email at the right time of day. Any advice for that?
Yeah, we did this. So we analyzed like 100 million emails sometime last year, and it seems that at a macro level, it makes no difference. So, but when you dive in, it does make a difference depending on the customer and who they are. So, for example, if you're B2B and you're selling to business users, on the weekend, probably not a good time, because they're not going to be in that frame of mind. Oh, today I want to buy X, Y, Z. They do that when they're at work, and when they're not, they're probably not thinking about it. Of course, that's a generalization. You'd have to test it, but that would be an example of one that generally holds true. In contrast, maybe sending an email at 4 p.m. on a Sunday is amazing if you're selling clothing online, because that's when people are just chilling at home and have the opportunity to buy that sort of stuff or to consider the purchase. So you got to put yourself in your customer's shoes, make some good assumptions as a baseline, and then test from there. So you certainly can't be being your own customer or pretending to be your own customer. How would that work?
Yeah, but I have noticed with email that you should try to get on a little bit of a schedule, especially if you do have e-commerce and you do tend to have sales, especially seasonal areas. We tend to, whatever site it is, some send early in the week, some send on Fridays and let the sale go through the weekend. But as long as you're consistent, then you're kind of training your customers to know when to kind of expect those emails from you.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Habit forming is amazing. And I saw a site the other day that had at the top weekly. They do a weekly Facebook competition or something, and it was the same time every week from what I could observe. And I sort of did a little bit digging into it. And I think that, like you're saying, that would build people who just come back because they remember it's Friday at 10 o'clock, which is a great thing. And email can help build those habits. There's actually a few people who write a lot about that, like Ryan Hoover, who founded Product Hunt. He wrote a book with someone about email driving habits. So I 100% agree with you.
Excellent. Well, let's tell a little bit about how people can find out more about Vero, maybe catch you, and what's going on.
Yeah, for sure. So, on Twitter, you can grab me at chexton, Chexton, that's my handle. But Vero's at getvero.com, as in come and get it. And we've also, I think probably most interesting is we've got a blog.getvero.com. So we try and publish, all this sort of stuff you and I have been talking about, and interesting learnings from customers or whatever's topical at the moment there. So that's probably the place to start. And if you've got any questions, definitely reach out to me. More than happy to talk with anyone.
Very cool. Well, what would you tell optimizers they can do? What would be their next step to really take their, the conversion rates and those sales specifically from email to that next level? Yeah,
that is, a fine question. I think we already sort of talked about it. The one that I'm most passionate about at the moment is the visualization, because I don't think many people do it. But I'm going to say what we spoke about in the middle there is probably where you could get the biggest win. So being serious about segmentation, which means being serious about collecting the right data. We did this test last year for ourselves, where I looked at our onboarding emails and the emails that we used to drive conversions from the blog to our actual trial signups of our product. And overall, like between all those campaigns, about 2% of people, just under, were converting to take either the trial sign-up action or the paid action. And so we really wanted to lift that number, and we got it up to just under 7%. We didn't send any more emails. We just segmented the volume of emails we were sending to be really, really specific. So maybe, one campaign, instead of going to 1,000 people, might only go to 200, but those 200 people had a real reason to get that email. And so that was around the same time I was talking before, where we started collecting information on, how big's your company, inviting other team members to your projects in Vero. So trying to collect more data around each of the individual signups so we could send them what was relevant for their next step, rather than a more general, hey, did you know you can do this with Vero? It's like, well, yes, if I've already done it, I don't care because I know what I'm doing. And so that process of getting serious about sometimes even building more friction into a process to get the data, and then actually not just having the data sit there, but having someone really go, well, hey, what data have we got? Where are the segments meaningful? What can we send these people that might make them click and do an action? And that really worked for us. 2%, 7% is a ridiculous increase. So we learned a lot through that process. So I'd say, if you're out there and you think, what could I do next? I would pose the question. how much segmentation do you guys do now? If you do none, then I would say do it on just one key metric, for example, the male or female. If you do a little bit already, then can you take it to the next level? Have you got enough volume to break it down even further? And then what information do you need to collect to do that?
Perfect. Thanks a lot for your time, Chris.
No worries. Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for watching the Marketing Optimization Podcast with Alex Designs. Please remember to subscribe to all of the videos in my YouTube channel. Thank you.